Hello, everyone. I'm François Picard. As expected, she pleaded the fifth. Jeffrey Epstein's former partner, Ghislaine Maxwell, who's serving a 20-year sentence for sex trafficking, making use of her constitutional right not to incriminate herself when she addressed a House of Representatives Oversight Committee hearing behind closed doors by video link. The Republican chair of the same committee that's subpoenaed former President Bill Clinton and his wife Hillary, downplaying speculation of a plea bargain deal with President Trump.
As expected, Ghislaine Maxwell took the fifth and refused to answer any questions. This obviously is very disappointing. We had many questions to ask about the crimes she and Epstein committed, as well as questions about potential co-conspirators. We sincerely want to get to the truth for the American people and justice for the survivors. That's what this investigation is about.
And that brings us to our Spotlight segment. Let's go to Washington and former U.S. federal prosecutor Eric Lisann. Thank you for speaking with us here on France 24.
It's always my pleasure, François. Good to see you.
Good to see you. The House Oversight Committee meeting behind closed doors. What was this exercise all about?
Well, this particular exercise was really just more of the circus variety, more political showmanship, an attempt to distract from some of the core questions that have arisen regarding Donald Trump's connections and knowledge of Jeffrey Epstein's activities. And it was somehow felt, hoped for, but understood that it would probably not come about, that she would reprise her questioning one-on-one with Todd Blanche, Donald Trump's former attorney, a few months ago, where she attempted to try to limit Donald Trump's knowledge and exposure and prior actions in regard to this. She knew this time around that she would face more scrutiny, more cynical questioning, more close questioning, and it could jeopardize her. There was nothing in it for her. So she's just exercising her Fifth Amendment right. That's all that this little spectacle was about today.
And there is still that speculation that perhaps the U.S. president at some point down the line will grant a pardon to the former socialite?
If he thought it would help him, he would do it in a minute. He's talked about it already many times, and it does seem that he was behind her being transferred to a much more minimal security prison where she is held in much better conditions than she was before this whole little dance started. So it's not out of the question. It's purely a political calculation as to whether Donald Trump and maybe whatever advisors he's listening to on this think that the damage to him politically from pardoning her will be greater than the benefit that he gets. But he probably feels at this point that he's gotten everything out of Ghislaine Maxwell that he's going to get, that she understands that she is to say no more negative things about him, if any at all. And I think things are probably going to lie this way right now, unless she really gets bold and agitates herself for a pardon and wants to get out of prison herself. She may get tired of even these relative minimal conditions of confinement that she's in. So I think in that sense, the ball is in her court. If she wants to sort of threaten Trump, it's a dangerous game, try to blackmail him. Given her own checkered past with her testimony, it's going to be high risk all around.
So, Eric Lisann, let's take a step back from the spectacle, as you put it. It's been 10 days since this massive document dump by the Justice Department. In all your years, have you ever seen something like this? Because there's still a lot of documents that have not been released.
Right. I think that's the thing that's somewhat overlooked, is that about half the documents still have not been released, and holding them back is completely illegal. There was a law that specifically said they had to be released. Even what has been released with heavy redactions in seeming violation of the law. And Trump and his seeming henchmen at the Department of Justice, Pam Bondi and Todd Blanche, can't be emphasized too much, it's his former personal criminal defense attorney, are saying, we're just not going to release anymore. There's nothing to see here. Move on. And I don't think that the public is ready to move on. I don't think the media is ready to move on. We do live in an age where there's very limited attention spans. So there's still this hope that that might happen on the part of Donald Trump. But the more people look at this, the more everybody's going to realize that his statements are not consistent, that they're false, they don't make any sense, and he likely is very heavily implicated in all this. So there is a sense of uncertainty all around here.
Yeah, because there's what the Justice Department itself releases, and there are documents in the hands of field bureaus, right, of the U.S. Department of Justice.
Yes, there has been over the course of the last year some attempt to centralize them all, even before this law went into force a few months back, and a lot of conflicting statements about what's going on. But there's been ample opportunity for mischief with these documents, but there's also been ample opportunity by those who might be anonymous now who are trying to safeguard them. So I don't think anybody knows, really has a handle on what's out there, but there's certainly other things that are explosive that are out there beyond what has been released. And even what's been released, it hasn't been, it's the volume is such that the significance of that hasn't fully been comprehended.
Yeah, it goes from the hearsay, the innocuous allusion to the smoking gun, what are in these emails. But they're obviously not corroborated at this point. They're not. You have implications in the UK. We're going to talk about in a moment. With the latest developments politically over in Britain. Here in France, with the former Culture and Education Minister, Jacques Lang, forced to step down over the weekend from heading the Institute of the Arab World, this at the behest of the French president. We can listen to Emmanuel Macron and the words he used on the sidelines of a wine expo that he attended this Monday.
Clearly, he had a very extensive network, which justifies letting the justice system do its work independently and calmly. And then I also see the airing of all the elements that have been revealed, which are, I think, very hard to endure for the victims, for their lawyers, those who defend them, and which afterwards produce a bit of everything.
So there you have Emmanuel Macron saying the U.S. has a justice system. Epstein had an extensive network. He later in that same Q&A talked about how the journalists are going to have to do their job. The Justice Department in the U.S. is going to have to do its job. Your reaction there when you listen to Emmanuel Macron, is he right to view the justice system in the U.S. The way you would the justice system in France these days?
Well, he's right, of course, to say that the justice system should be at work here, and there's a lot of investigation that should be done. Right now, of course, Donald Trump is blocking all of that investigation on the U.S. side where it would normally happen and where the primary resources and expertise for that historically would be found. So right now we have this sort of artificial blockade on the further investigation that is necessary. And we don't know the full extent of the investigations that have been done in the past. It does seem that there was much more investigation done in the past that we are aware of as the public is aware, speaking of the public right now generally, and we're still coming to grips with what is and wasn't done. It looks like at some points or another, many other people were close to being charged, and Donald Trump himself years back was a possible defendant. So there were political reasons that did cause this to be held back, and there's political reasons today that are completely blockading the further investigation that is necessary at the U.S. federal level. Whether that can endure long term, we don't know, but there should be continuing pressure from the public and from the media on political figures to ensure that some sort of a professional, neutral investigation can take place in the future. And it's not clear whether it will or whether it won't. This is still very much a fluid situation.
One final question for you, Eric Lisann. Several reports in the last few days about how it's difficult at your old haunt to hire federal attorneys these days. Your thoughts on that they're having trouble getting people to work for the Justice Department?
Right. It's not surprising they're having a huge amount of trouble. It's completely fallen into ruin, and it's going to be akin to the labors of Hercules to get this straightened out if ever that opportunity even arises. It's a shame because it was a primary pillar or institution in safeguarding democracy and the rule of law in the United States. I don't know. Nobody can really predict what it's going to be like in the future, but it has been totally destroyed from within right now, and the consequences to society are severe. We're seeing that in Minnesota and in many other cases, but the destruction of something like this can serve only to hasten the demise of the rule of law and further the entrenchment of autocratic forces in society. So it's no accident that this has happened.
Eric Lisann, many thanks for joining us from Washington.
My pleasure.